Many thanks, Abdul Salam Jibril, for that background. With us in the studios now to discuss this issue in further detail, we would like to welcome the Honorable Minister of Environment, Dr. Mohammed Mahmoud Abubakar. Honorable Minister, pleasure to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
All right, and also joining us for this conversation from Benin is architect Nimo Basi. He's right there in our Benin Network Center. He's director, head of Mother Foundation. I take that again, head of Mother Earth Foundation. Architect Nimo Basi, delight to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Very much. Good morning.
And via Zoom from Lagos is Desmond Majekolumi, founder, Lekki Urban Forest. It is a pleasure to have you with us this morning.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. Okay, gentlemen, once again, we welcome you to this conversation. Indeed, all our guests are persons who are concerned with and about the environment and have played their respective roles over the years. Let's bring in first the Honorable Minister of the Environment, Dr. Mahmoud Abubakar. We're looking at the 6 years of the Buhari administration. We know that, of course, you were not there in the first step, but you've been there now for nearly 2 years and carried on from where your predecessors stopped. So tell us, from your reading and your activities, how well have we tried to manage our environment in the past 6 years?
Thank you for inviting me this morning. Indeed, I was not here before, in the last, let's say, 2 years. But looking at the literature, this government, right from the start, has accomplished so much in terms of environment. It so happened that Mr. President himself is interested in environment. And let me start with one of the most controversial issues in the Niger Delta, in other words, the oil and gas pollution. Before the coming of Mr. President, the issue of Ogoni cleanup or the Niger Delta cleanup has been a story. Many governments have attempted, let's give them our credit, attempting, but the President Buhari is the only one that actually, let me say, inaugurated the project and is currently being worked on. Several sites have been cleaned up. In other words, the Ogoni cleanup picked up in started in 2016, contracts were awarded, an additional contract were awarded, and they are currently being executed. About 17 sites now, 21 actually, have been remediated. A number of them have been certified clean by the certification agency, which is NOSDRA. The remaining are at different stages of compilation. Also, as is attached to that project, there's the issue of livelihood, provision of water. That, of course, did not take place at the very beginning, but we have just recently awarded 6 major contracts of water provision for that Ogoni land in all the 4 local government of Kana, Gokana, Eleme, and Tai. Livelihood is another part of that project, and that livelihood is teaching the people skills, different kinds of skills, so that when these lands are clean and become usable again, which they are now, they can carry out their lively activities, be it agriculture, aquaculture. All this are being taught currently. The women are being trained. So that is on the issue of Ogoni cleanup. Also, there is a particular site in Niger, which is a contaminated site, a mining site. That also has been remediated by this particular administration from the very beginning. These are things that happened before our coming. We have the record. These are public records. Anybody has the right to go and take a look at the ministry. There's also issue of our wetlands being choked by taifa grass and things like that. And why the Unguru Jigawa wetland is important? Because of its connection with Lake Chad. Well, the ministry has done a lot of clearing of this taifa grass. Now, as I speak with you, we have water flowing all the way down to the Lake Chad Basin. And at the same time, we have created some channel of navigation. So this is also an achievement of this particular administration. And then you have the green bond. These are financial instruments that have to do with clean energy, that have to do with clean environmental projects. And Nigeria in Africa is the first to issue green bond. We have issued one, we have issued two. Right now, I will be going to Lagos next week for the second issuance of the green bond. And these are, like I said, financial instruments that will provide funds for green projects. All that is under this particular administration right from the start to date. Also, we have afforestation program. The minimum forest cover for any country, according to the United Nations standard, is 25%. We have, at the time I believe we came in, was like about 3-point-something%. Today we are heading up to about 7%. There has been massive reforestation by our agencies, namely Nigeria, some of the Federal Forestry Department, the FRIN, that is Forestry Research Institute of Nigeria, and then we have the National Agency for the Great Green Wall. We have the Desertification and Drought Department. These are all agencies and departments that are involved in tree planting. And we have special project, it's called RED Plus. This is reducing emission through, of course, augmenting forestry. So that is also a big achievement for this administration, because forestry today is perhaps the single most important project that you can undertake to reduce the effect of climate change, because, of course, trees absorb, sink the carbon. So this is another thing. Nigeria has also...
Sorry to interject. Where is the reforestation program taking place? Where are the trees being planted?
All across the country. The Great Green Wall is across all the 11 frontline states, we call them. This is a Pan-African project. There are 11 countries in this Great Green Wall project. So that is going on. The others in all the states of the Federation. We are collaborating with the state government, so it's everywhere. RED Plus, you have like 21 states in that particular project. The nationwide afforestation is in every single of the 36 states of the Federation. Depending, of course, on sites, the kind of vegetation there, the kind of forest there. We have a strong presence, especially in mangrove restoration in the south-south Niger Delta. And the project of Ogoni has embedded in it funds for restoration of mangrove, which are very important, in climate change issue. We have also participated in the international concern on the recharge of Lake Chad. This is a project that was initiated by Mr. President, and currently even chairing or leading the inter-basin water transfer of Lake Chad, because that is a critical area. A lot of climate change issue, security issue emanated from the drying of Lake Chad. We have actively participated in a lot of multilateral, bilateral programs. Of course, Nigeria is a signatory to the Paris Agreement. All of this are some of the things that the administration has accomplished from the very beginning. Now, I'm taking a lot of this project that were even undertaken by the administration from the beginning. That's before our coming. Also, beginning now, we have turned to solid waste management. This administration has built more solid waste recycling plants than any other, I can tell you, within the short time that is there. And our objective is to make sure that in every state and down further local governments, we have recycling plant. To support that, we were able to have two policies approved by the Federal Executive Council. One is the National Solid Waste Management Policy. Second is the National Plastic Waste Management Policy. These are also part of enablers. We call them enablers that will enable the government to be able to implement some of this projects. So these are list of project and some achievement. But in particular, I would like to bring your attention to the number of policies. And again, without legal framework, it may be difficult to be able to carry out any kind of project or even programs. We have already gotten about 7 policies that this administration also has come up with. One of them is National Policy on Environment itself, which is like the coordinating policy. I've mentioned the Solid Waste Management Policy. I've mentioned the Plastic Policy, National Forest Policy, which I explained earlier because we need to increase our forest cover in the country. Just last Wednesday, we were able to pass our revised National Climate Change Policy, and then our National Biosafety Policy, and finally, also National Action Plan on Gender and Climate Change. Climate change affects everybody, but through research, it was discovered that women bear the most burden because they are more part of the livelihood, whether it's forest, whether it's within the city, everywhere. So these are some of the policy. Of course, the achievement also, this, while I'm still here, is acceleration of the Ogoni cleanup. When we came, things have started, but we were able to accelerate through the intervention of Mr. President. He has approved the restructuring of the Ogoni cleanup. We have brand new BOT in place. We have brand new governing council in place, consultant new in place that we believe will deliver more competent. UNEP, which submitted the report, to carry out the study, submitted the report, is now playing a bigger role in terms of the technical support that they were providing earlier. We are now upgrading it to additional consultancy project management of that Ogoni, because the objective of Mr. President is to make sure that the Ogoni land is cleaned up and leading onto other areas of the Niger Delta. So again, moving on to all of this, we have a program that is called Energizing Education, now moving into energy. And that is part of the issuance of green bond. So now we have a number of federal universities that are being energized with solar power. The 2 main ones that were first inaugurated, commissioned rather, in Nsukka and Bayero University. I was actually in Bayero University when they commissioned, Mr. Vice President commissioned that particular project. So you go to these 2 universities, you will see other universities are also at various stages of compilation. So these are some of the achievements. There are other, I guess you can come to them.
All right, there are other achievements, and let me just draw attention to this one. The establishment of the Nigeria Erosions and the Watershed Management Project, NEWAP, is a response to the erosion in the southeast and, of course, degradation in the northern part of Nigeria.
Yes.
Tell us more about that.
Thank you. This is one of our flagship projects. The NEWAP actually, like you rightly mentioned, started from the southeast. Southeast, we all know, is the most erosion-prone area in the country. And even in our budget, especially erosion project, you see that is reflected. There are more projects. Now, what brought about NEWAP is the extent of erosion in Southeast. Our normal budgetary provision may not be able to handle this kind of massive gullies in the Southeast. Unfortunately, every geopolitical zone or every part of the country have different kind of geological setup. It so happened that the geology in the Southeast is such that the soil is easily waterlogged and can have mass movement. So you tend to have more gullies being created. So the new map handles the heavier, bigger project than the ministry. And that is a collaboration between the federal government and the World Bank. And this project is so successful that it won several awards from the World Bank itself, and even United Nations has recognized the quality of work of NUMAP. And based on that, I wrote and applied for NUMAP 2, which right now is in the process. And this will also go in a long way in rehabilitating or establishing even just plain livelihood in some semi-arid landscape, not necessarily just erosion now. We want to expand the NUMAP project and have a holistic approach to it, because, of course, climate change can be aggravated by just about anything you can think of. So this is about NUMAP. It's highly a successful project.
As a follow-up, we often hear about ecological funds,
right,
being distributed to different states of the country.
Yes.
And in most cases, we don't see what the ecological funds are used for, especially by the state governments. What is the nature of collaboration between the federal government and states with respect to some of these environmental policies you're talking about?
Ecological fund is administered and used in different ways. Yes, there is the state have access to ecological fund. If there is any statutory amount being given to state, also government officials, bodies, even NGOs can apply and ask for a project. Ecological Fund Office will take all this project, look at it. Of course, the Ecological Fund Office is in the office of the SGF, but the Ministry of Environment work in some ways, in the project. So there are so many ways that can be done. And what you said, well, let me say, it depends on how the state manage their ecological fund. It depends on where they locate their project, how visible these projects are for people to see and know that it's from ecological fund. Sometimes people may not be told that, hey, this is from federal government. It will just be a project that the state is executing and may not know is from the federal government. So, but the ecological fund is there, is working. Every now and then, a project of the ecological fund will come to the Federal Executive Council, will be deliberated by the council and be approved. And this is in every single part of the country.
All right. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Well, we're going to pause you and then bring in our other two guests whom we earlier introduced. There's Desmond Majakodumi, who is with us via Zoom, and then from our Benin Network Center, Architect Nimo Basi. My first question, of course, is going to Architect Nimo Basi at our Benin Network studios. Now, in terms of policies, programs, and projects, are we now enacting a more harmonious relationship with our environment?
Thank you for asking me such a broad question, and very important also. You can have a lot of, the number of policies that you have does not really indicate that you have restored connection to our environment. You could have one policy that covers it all, but but really, I recognize the fact that, as the minister mentioned, we have a number of policies, some old ones that have been revised. I think one thing that we need that can help us check the temperature, to check the barometer of how well we're doing the environment, would be to have a regular state of the environment report issued by the Ministry of Environment. The Ministry of Environment at the federal level is working on, doing so much with very little amount of support or resources. And we don't see commensurate support or extent of work at the other levels of governance, at the local government, as well as the state government. This should be one of the issues that we should also look into. What are the things that local government should do? And of course, we know the problem with local government, that there is not really being, their role has been usurped and kind of diminished by certain political miscalculations. And states also have a role to play in terms of understanding what are the things that are critical to their regions, to their states, and investing more in those things. The minister mentioned the work being done in the area of reforestation. I would just like to comment on that before, as we proceed. News coming out from forest-dependent communities is actually very alarming at this moment. There's massive deforestation going on in Cross River State area, and we're seeing videos and pictures and receiving reports of massive logging that don't appear to have any form of control. And we would like to see this kind of massive deforestation checked. We've heard reports from other states also on having the same issue happening. And now I think in terms of the environment, before we can really say that we are on the right path to restoring harmony with the environment, understanding the fact that most of our people depend directly on the environment, and as for their health as well as for livelihoods, we need to ask the question, what has happened to gas flaring in the Niger Delta? What has happened to gas flaring has been going on for about 60 years, more than 60 years in some locations. I mean, this is one of the biggest assaults. A high court declared in 2005 that this activity is against the human rights of people, of Nigerians. Apart from the fact that it's an economic waste and the fact that it affects the health of the people directly. And so we like to see a stoppage of the shifting of the miles goalposts in terms of the dates for stopping gas flaring. The first goalpost was 1984 when the law kicked in. And thereafter, recently in the life of this administration, we heard that it will be 2020 will be the deadline for stopping gas flaring. But currently we're hearing either to 2025 or 2030, as the World Bank has also said. So we would like to have a definite program, see when this kind of environmental monstrosity will come to an end. Then with regard to the Ogoni cleanup, I've personally been one of the champions supporting the cleanup and speaking up and underscoring the fact that it's a massive laboratory for learning. There hasn't been such a cleanup anywhere else at that scale, anywhere else in the world. And we need to keep in mind that the Exxon Valdez spill, which occurred in 1989, was followed up with a massive cleanup. 1989, massively cleaned up with all the equipment, the people, resources, but up till this date as we speak, scientists and others are still able to find traces of the spill that occurred then. And of course, some of the species that were destroyed by the spill have not returned to that area. The same thing with the Gulf of Mexico oil spill that occurred. And so when we look at this in terms of the Niger Delta, we talk about the Ogoni cleanup and we support it, we want it to succeed. But what about the rest of the Niger Delta? We don't have to wait until the Ogoni cleanup is completed before we begin cleaning up other parts of the Niger Delta. As we speak, there's an oil spill, a blowout that occurred at the Ororo 1 oil well off the coast of Ondo State in April last year, April 2020. If you're tracking that incident, both oil spill and the flames from that spill are still ongoing. When would that be stopped? We need to see a real auditing of the entire Niger Delta. We have to move to that phase, auditing the pollution in the Niger Delta, the environment of the Niger Delta, and then beginning the process while the Ogoni cleanup continues. And with regard to the Ogoni cleanup, I would like personally to see, we would like to see a situation where some of the governing, the national regulations with regard to who can handle the cleanup is adjusted to allow expertise of those who have the equipment and the resources from outside of this country to directly be involved in the cleanup, because it's really a big problem. And finally on this, I would like to point out the fact that our environment is adversely affected all across the nation, is democratically disrupted across the nation. And taking care of the environment can be one way of building harmony in this nation, because everyone across the land, north, south, east, west, we all depend on the environment. And we cannot afford we can't really look at one problem of being restricted to one area. When Lake Chad dries up and Happy is being recharged by opening up the water, removing the weeds and getting more water to flow there. There's also the plan of bringing more water from maybe as far as Central African Republic to recharge Lake Chad, because when the Lake Chad continues to shrink, it has an impact on the conflict, violent conflict we're seeing in our country. So one thing, something happens in one area, it affects other people in other areas. We need to have a very holistic look at the environment. And I would like to see a situation where every ministry at the federal level pays attention to what the Ministry of Environment is saying, because almost it affects everywhere. It affects health, water resources, mineral resources, and we should have a level playing ground. The kind of laws we have governing solid minerals should apply also to the oil sector. We cannot, the oil communities. We can't afford to have one kind of law in for one sector, another one that is totally disruptive of relationship with the people and communities in another sector. There are many things that we could say, but I just hope that we touch more areas as the conversation continues.
As a matter of fact, in the course of the program, you may return to, of course, let us know some of the ways we could respond to the challenges that you have raised. But for now, let's go to Desmond Majekodunmi, the founder of Lekki Urban Forest. Sir, you've listened to the Honorable Minister of Environment and, of course, Nimo Basi raised some very vital points in this conversation. But you may like to comment on their contribution, but let me also add this question to you. We are in the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration to prevent, halt, reverse degradation on land and seas. Are we on the right path towards achieving this?
Very good question. Very, very important indeed. We actually started on the right path even before the UN had made this declaration. And what I'm referring to is the caliber of people that have been put in charge of the Ministry of Environment with the onset of this administration, starting with Amina Mohammed, who, by the way, was so good and so well qualified that the United Nations now extracted her and put her as the Deputy Secretary General. And from what I'm seeing and hearing, our minister in charge now is of a very, very high caliber of intellect and understanding. Likewise, the Minister of State, Honorable Sharon. I'm very impressed with the caliber of people spearheading this ministry. And why am I impressed? Because this ministry, as alluded to by my brother Nimo Basi, is actually, it's the most important ministry that any country can have right now. In fact, if I had my way, I would change the name of the ministry to the Ministry of the Life Support System, because that's exactly what it oversees. And in this particular decade, we need to ask ourselves, why is the United Nations taking such a serious view? The reason is that they have been studying the data for decades. And quite some time back, they started becoming quite alarmed at what we human beings have been doing to the life support system, to the environment. And this is why they set up over 30 years ago, almost 30 years, the International Panel for Climate Change, because they had observed that we were upsetting a very precise and delicate balance within the atmospheric gases of this planet. Let us bear in mind that planet Earth, of all the interstellar bodies, is the only one that has the capability of supporting life. And the main reason why she is able to support life is because of the precise ratio and balance of gases in her atmosphere. Huh? Not to mention the wonderful combination of different biodiverse zones, not to mention the seas themselves. We as human beings, over the last 200 years since the advent of the Industrial Revolution, have been upsetting this balance. And it has reached a stage whereby the Secretary General of the United Nations in December had to make a declaration, and I quote him. This declaration, it shook me to my very core. What did he say? He said, mankind is committing war against nature, and this is suicidal. Use that word, suicidal, because nature always fights back, and she's fighting back with vigor and strength. He also said that the point of no return is no longer in the horizon. It is hurtling towards us. You see, what we're doing to the life support systems of this earth, we're pushing them to a point whereby if we continue this way, we shall not be able to reverse the degradation, and eventually it shall be catastrophic. So nature is now fighting back. And believe you me, nature is bound by very specific laws, the law of action and reaction. Whatever you give nature, she gives you back. Unlike God Almighty, who can forgive you all the time or most of the time, man who can forgive you some of the time, nature does not have the capacity to forgive. She gives. Whatever you give her, she gives you back. And we as human beings have been giving her far too much damage, and that's why we're now seeing the results of that. Whatsoever a man sows, surely shall he reap. And this is why the United Nations have, set up this 10 years of restoration, because they know that we're running out of time.
Yeah, that's right.
Very rapid.
Mr. Desmond Majakodumi, thank you very much for that explanation of the UN decade. I was just wondering, let's get to more specific national issues. I recall that a couple of years ago, we had you on Good Morning Nigeria, and we were getting into the subject of plastic pollution in the country. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. Today, the Honorable Minister has indicated that there is a national policy on the control of plastic pollution. Are you familiar with this new policy? And if so, are you satisfied with what it intends to achieve, considering that we are virtually submerged now by plastics and plastic-related products as waste in our environment?
Yes, unfortunately for us, you see, the plastic issue, I call it the calabash moi leaf problem, because traditionally plastic is quite new to us. I mean, in days gone by, even to today, we use, biodegradable substances, our calabash, our moi leaf, and then all of a sudden, now we're having to get used to plastic, which is so dangerous if it's irresponsibly used. And we're glad to see that the ministry has enacted these policies, and they are filtering down. In Lagos State, they're taking it quite seriously, and a few other states, but it needs to be taken far, far more seriously. When you're putting a pollution into the system that might not biodegrade for over 100 years, and we're doing massive use of this. So, as my brother Nemo suggested, there needs to be a collaboration of all the ministries, the really, really need to be led by the policy of the Ministry of Environment. Because if we go wrong with the environment, then everything else goes wrong. The plastic pollution is already causing terrible problems in the waterways. Not to mention, blocking off drainages and causing more flooding and so on. It's causing terrible problems in the mangroves, in the oceans. And the biodiversity of those places have been massively degraded. And we depend on the waterways to give us different aspects of our proteinous substances. So it's very, very important. And, I really feel that the only hope for us in the long term, and even in the medium term, is to really, really lift up the Ministry of Environment. Luckily, and I'll say it again, I'm not looking for any favor from them at all, but I'll say it again, we're very lucky to have two people in charge of that ministry and in charge of some of the parastatals who are of the highest caliber of intellect, and also they understand the problem. And they need to be listened to. They need to be put at the forefront. Security systems are going to be far more negatively impacted if the environment breaks down. You have far more hunger in the land. You have even floods. They say a hungry man is an angry man. What of a man who can't get water? So I advocate for far more strength and prominence in the Ministry of Environment.
Thank you indeed. And let's return to the studio here where we have the Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, I'd like you to also talk more on this issue of a national policy on plastic pollution, because as he rightly pointed out, these are non-biodegradable items made of polyethylene. But today, one thing is to make policy, another is to implement the policy to the latter.
Yes.
In most Nigerian markets, what we see is polythene bags. These are plastic-related items. I don't know how far this policy can go in ensuring that perhaps we begin to use paper bags in the country. There are many countries that, of course, have this policy that no plastic or any material made of plastic is being used publicly in the marketplaces, as the case may be. So how far is this policy going? How do we get this policy implemented in the country?
We want to carry it as far as we can go, up to that point where we'll say no plastic, just paper. But it's going to take some steps to gradually get to that point. Right now, we are starting, one, with the policy, two, with the building of these plastic recycling plants. Some of these plastics, you will be surprised when you see an interlock today in houses or in commercial buildings, and you may not know you are working on plastic. And some of these plants that we are establishing across the country, handing over to the state government, but with specific understanding that they be work with private sector. That's the only way that we think that will be sustainable. But most importantly, the policy itself has other components. Within that is embedded what you call EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. The importers of plastic, manufacturers of plastic will be responsible for this plastic. That is the end of life, or from the very beginning. It's called cradle to grave law. Is in the environmental sector. In other words, they will be responsible for this. Is an arrangement where we hold them responsible. But that is not it. Also in the policy is embedded that in the next 5 years, we'll completely stop the use of single-use plastics. Now, if you want to replace plastic completely, you must provide an alternative. Can we produce the paper bags that we need? When you go to developed countries, they might even ask you, do you want plastic or paper? If you want plastic, you are likely to even pay more to be able to use that. If you want paper, you can get that free or at much less cost. But first, they have provided the alternative. So that is what we are trying to do. We are giving time to do this, and then we are holding somebody further responsible. And then we have advocacy in which we are educating people to be able to reuse and recycle within themselves. And then we have the, in addition to the extended producer responsibility, is the circular economy, which is what we are now doing, moving away from the traditional linear where you just produce, you finish using, you dispose. We want to now keep product in circulation. How do you do that? In the first place, it's embedded also in the solid waste management and the plastic waste management. Do as much as you can to even reduce the amount of waste you produce in the first place. Reduce what you can, reuse what you can. Recycle it, repair and recover. We have gone from 3 R's to now 5. This is all in an effort, especially with plastic, to keep what we can in circulation so that we are not producing more.
Are state governments on the same page with you on this?
Yes, this politics, in fact, in the implementation section, it's not just state. First is the federal that will lead the way with the support, with the legislation and everything. Then the state, various ministries of environment that we are working with. Then moving down all the way to the local government, down to the communities. In fact, we have, in the policy, you will see NGOs, CBOs, CSOs are all part of this. This is a policy that needs holistic approach, and everybody must be part of the implementation.
Yeah, Honorable Minister, that's fine, because again, that is on paper in terms of policy. In terms of implementation, I'm wondering, because I haven't sensed the advocacy that would drive Nigerians to recognize that, well, we don't have to dispose of our plastics, waste plastics, indiscriminately as we used to do, nor are you seeing persons who are saying, oh, look, there's money in this plastic now.
Right.
If you are recycling plants, let me keep picking them up so that I put them in a bag and at some point I sell them. What you find in a number of urban centers is still the same old story. People just suck the water they have in the sachet, dispose of it. Somebody finishes using this plastic, using the plastic for soft drinks or water, and they still discard it. So that's why I was asking, in terms of implementation, what are we seeing from the code letter of the policy to actual reality, even with the recycling plants that we have?
It's beginning to happen. Like I said, it's gradual. Right here in Abuja, we have people who are collecting plastic, and we have people who are picking these plastics and taking them to the recycling center and get paid. Kids, especially, kids that have no job, little kids and things like that. And this is how it starts. And the advocacy is there. Like, for example, this show is part of the advocacy. And then we do also go down to the community level. We do also try to work with other media houses to propagate this. So it is there. Now, when something has been happening for years, it's not easy to just get rid of it one day, especially when people are resistant to change. But the incentive here is you can make money. And with the private sector coming in, they will give that incentive where people can bring in maybe a kilo of this, you pay this much. The same thing we did in Rivers, where we built a metal recycling plant. I was there during the commissioning. Already people are bringing in scrap metals, are getting money for it, and being taken by the plant.
We hope those scrap metals are not part of the rail tracks that have been vandalized.
No, we make sure we are not taking anything that comes. We have to screen it.
Screen it, yes.
Honourable Minister, you've spoken well in this respect, but I'm also wondering how we can gradually stop the use of products made of polyethylene without actually having industries that are focused on developing paper bags, as we have polythene bags all over Nigeria. So is there any strategy towards this, or encouraging perhaps the private sector to key into this? Because you have a policy already on ground,
Yes.
but we are talking about its implementation. You said it's going to take a gradual process.
Right.
That is understandable.
Right.
But then, having said that, you also need to, step up some actions, right? Towards ensuring that bold steps are being taken to gradually, minimize or totally eliminate, the use of polyethylene made products.
Yes, we do. And what I even forgot to mention is we have an interministerial committee, just like they have mentioned, and which is rightly so. The Federal Ministry of Environment is in collaboration with other MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies. But most importantly, with private sector. That is something that we are pushing towards, because in the end, what we want is to have an economy that is robustly being supported by the private sector. That will even create more jobs, unlike now that the biggest employer in Nigeria or in most developing countries is the government. So we are working seriously with the private sector. And in this particular case of encouraging them to build this recycling plant, and when it comes to time for paper or other substitute, it doesn't have to be just paper. We can use other raw materials to make these bags. Even what we are talking about, nature-based solution, we are shifting to nature also. You can have straws from nature that you can use to make bags. These are 100% biodegradable. This can be cultivated and harvested and cultivated, just like in developed countries. There are people who their business is just production of hay, year after year after year. So these are all areas that we are looking at. Really, we are not leaving any stone unturned in this case.
All right, Honorable Minister, thank you very much. We're going to have to take a short break now, but when we return, Honorable Minister, before we go back to our other guests, there are a number of issues raised by architect Nimo Basi, which I would like you to respond to. But let's go on this short break, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria live on NTA's network service. Welcome back to Good Morning Nigeria, and we are still live on NTA's network service. Let's go back very quickly to the Honorable Minister of the Environment, who's still here with us in the Abuja studios. Before we went on that short break, Minister, I did say that there were a number of issues raised by Nimo Basi, who is still with us from our Benin Network Center. I would like you to respond to those issues. One, he talks about the fact that there should be a concern that while the federal government is taking the lead in matters of environment, there appears to be no significant action being undertaken at the subnational levels in general. And so it makes reference to massive deforestation and uncontrolled logging in a place like Cross River, for instance. So when you say there is replanting, there is reforestation, the question will be, where is the evidence? That's one. Secondly, he also says that there is need for auditing pollution in the entire Niger Delta beyond the Ogoni cleanup that is ongoing. And it's also drawn attention to the fact that perhaps there might be need to publish a regular state of the environment report. What are your reactions to these issues?
Well, the issue of deforestation, yes, is a problem that we are facing, but we are dealing with it. Recently, the government has suspended export of forest product. Now, yes, from time to time, you may find a situation where exporters connive somehow and move out product. But when we do seize them. I just wrote another letter to the Nigeria Customs Service, to the Ministry of Finance, and all the agencies that are supposed to help us keep track of this product that we suspended the export of. We are doing that. We have banned entirely the production and export of charcoal in the country because it's so devastating to the environment. We have land use law which gives the state more power on the land, and sometimes we have that issue when it comes to deforestation by the government, not individuals or corporations. And that is something that we are working with. And I think during this particular administration, we have gotten a good understanding with the subnational, the state governors that have even agreed to gazette some lands that will be kept as federal forest reserve. We have already started receiving these parcels of land. However, yes, indeed, you are talking about deforestation inside. We have had in Taraba, in Cross River. We are always talking with this government and keeping track who is doing this logging, what should be done, what can be done. You are right. It's something that is not easy, but is doable. And I assure you, the ministry is doing everything. We will enforce the law according to the Constitution and make sure we safeguard our forest cover. The gas flaring issue, yes, is something that in itself has been a major thorn in our flesh in this country, and in particular the environment and our health. That is something also that is being looked at. The Federal Minister of Petroleum Resources, Environment, and any other agency, talks are ongoing and have been. And I can assure you that it's being taken seriously, and we will be seeing some action, because this is going to be a win-win situation if we stop this flaring. Not only will stop the pollution, but also we'll be able to use that methane that is being flared in some ways to even produce electricity or heating or something like that. So it's going to be a win-win situation, but it's not just one ministry that is going to be doing that. And it's going to take a little bit of time. We also need investors who will invest in the gas that will be stopped from being flared. So, and pollution inventory. We have our Pollution Control and Environmental Health Department, which is keeping track of all this. And we do have segmented, since we have the policy on the ground, we have hazardous waste, conventional waste, solid, liquid waste, all of that is all embedded in that policy. And we have our enforcement agency that is working with the agency, going to industries or anywhere that need to be inspected and investigated and carry out the needed corrections. And finally, also Desmond spoke about the environment, what it used to be, what it is now, the planet and all that. Well, you know, I often say the environment by itself, without us, is even a better manager of itself. And that's why today we are coming back to nature-based solution. Before the advent of man, there has been flood, fires, volcanic eruption, and everything. And then after years, the environment will now fix, regenerate, and all that. So we came, genius as we are, we had done some stuff that we are not even being able to fix, as the environment was fixing itself. Take, for example, the ozone layer. We introduced these chemicals that did not even exist in nature, hydrochlorofluorocarbons, that are eating up the ozone layer. So we now, I guess, have woken from our slumber that the environment can only take so much. We can't dish everything to the environment, or doubt it will be dishing to us. So I think it's something that we have understood. That's why now climate change issue is everybody's concern, all countries across the world. You also talked about life support. Yes, I can say, call us Minister of Life Support System. The trees that we are talking about, forest, is part of the structural support system of the planet. Additional ones are mountains, rivers. These are what are keeping the planet together. You remove all this, the planet will fall apart. So it's very important that we make sure we maintain this support system, and the ministry is doing everything possible to do that. Report of Minister of Environment, we do have reports, but this is something that maybe we'll look at how all the agencies, because we have agencies and they do produce report. Even our project, like High Prep, has monthly and quarterly report, but we'll look at a
state of the
environment report that will talk about the whole environment by itself. Okay. So just quickly, and finally, sorry, with the plastic, he also mentioned I am the co-chair of the Africa, what do you call it, Circular Economy Alliance, and that includes plastic. So we are very visible in all these things. Go ahead.
All right. Pilots will tell you that when they're flying across Nigeria in the middle of the night, there's only one sign that they see that will tell them that they're in Nigeria. That's the gas flaring.
Yeah.
All right. And again, as rightly pointed out, it is said in some quarters that the environment does not need us, that we need the environment.
Absolutely.
Just as you said. So let's get back to Nimo Bassey, Director, Head of Mother Earth Foundation. So actions and inactions of human beings actually have serious impact on the environment. In most cases, we have biodiversity loss, pollution, deforestation, road accidents, and what have you, as a result of human behavior towards the environment. So how would you assess human behavior towards the environment? Take Nigeria, for instance. We just talked about, the Minister has just talked about the ozone layer depletion and what have you. How can we be more friendly to the environment, or at least to assist the Ministry of Environment in the work it's doing?
Thank you very much. I think the first thing we need to do is for all of us to recognize the fact that, as you said, that the planet does not necessarily need human beings, but human beings cannot live anywhere else, as far as we know, outside of this planet. So we have an in-depth interest to ensure that we protect the environment that gives us the space to live in and to thrive in. Now, one of the challenges human beings have is that we think that we know more than nature. Sometimes we think we can improve nature, that we can make nature more efficient than she is. But I think also the good thing is that many nations are beginning to understand the fact that Mother Earth, or nature herself, has a right to exist, a right to maintain her cycle, natural cycles, and that human beings have obligation not to disrupt any of these cycles of Mother Earth. A country like Ecuador in Latin America, Bolivia in Latin America, they have the rights of nature in their constitutions. Recently, Uganda adopted the right of nature also in the governance structure. This is something that we need to consider in Nigeria, so that we understand that when we carry out negative actions, we are actually offending the very basis of our existence. There's an ongoing campaign to make ecocide a crime and a law, which means massive, irreversible destruction of the ecosystem in the same range as genocide, as war, crimes against humanity and war crimes, recognized in the Rome Statutes, and which are actionable at the International Criminal Court. So that those who carry out this kind of massive destruction, like oil spills, gas flares, can be brought before the International Criminal Court to account for their actions and their misbehaviors. This would be an incentive for everybody to be careful, whether you are a director of a corporation or you are a government official giving instruction for certain action to be taken. The clear definition of that law is going to be launched in a couple of days, because people just hear about ecocide and people say, what does this mean? How does it work in law? So there's a gradual effort towards that. And I think we're seeing more and more countries coming to terms with that fact. Having said that, I want to mention that one of the things that the Ministry of Environment has done, to me, one of the significant actions in the past 6 years was the very, very clear and effective work that was done to ensure that the proposed superhighway by the Cross River State government that was to start from Esigi, one of the small stream near the Bakassi coast, in the coast Paboyo area, would have gone to cut across and take 25% of the area landmass of that state, because the highway was proposed to have a right of way 10 kilometers on either side, which was totally incredible. The Ministry of Environment stood up to, demanded the environmental impact assessment for that over a number of times, and eventually that highway, the state government rescinded the idea of grabbing so much land on the other side, which would have destroyed communities and destroyed community forests and the natural and the protected forests. And now ministry ensured that that highway was realigned away from the forest, away from protected area. That to me was a very significant victory, standing with the communities, defending biodiversity, and showing the way we should use the environmental impact assessment law, not just as a perfunctory document for plan approval, but as something that is enforceable in the interest of the planet, interest of the people and the communities. One other area I would like to quickly mention that we tend to think we know too much is in the area of the way we wrote biodiversity in terms of genetic engineering. The biosafety law was signed in 2015 in the dying days of President Jonathan's government and then implemented by the present administration. Since that law came into effect, a number of genetically modified organisms and crops have been endorsed, approved, allowed to be experimented on, and from what we've heard, genetically engineered beans would soon be, seeds will be released, if not already released to farmers to cultivate genetically engineered beans. Some of us have spent a lot of time campaigning on these issues, not because we're against science, but because we realize that if you allow certain things to be done, you are exposing your biodiversity to serious erosion, and our people would never be warned about what they are eating. They wouldn't know what they're eating. You cannot label akara as GMO akara. You cannot label moi moi. There are many things. You cannot label bole or even the corn that is roasted by the wayside, so that people would not have a choice. And we have concerns, and we made a lot of recommendations for the strengthening and the closing of loopholes in that act. But recently, about a year ago, we had an addition to that law, which allows for extreme or extinction genetic engineering, something like gene editing, which doesn't mean you take genetic material from one species to another, but you can now edit within that species. And you can engineer the species to go into extinction within a few generations because you determine the traits, what would be the result of reproductive activities within that species. And that could be used, of course, conservationists have said we can use it to wipe out rats, wipe out some snakes, or wipe out certain species, but every species is interconnected. You wipe out one, you are promoting another one, and one could be worse than the other. And now we have the pandemic. Now, there's been a lot of arguments. Some of us said we need to have a clear statement whether this pandemic came from the laboratory or whether it came from natural transfer of genetic virus from animals into human beings. And the answer we've been getting until recently was that, well, there's no trace to show that it was engineered in the laboratory. But of course, there are possibilities of engineering species without leaving the markers or the traits. That is also known. But we just continue waving. But right now, questions are being raised again, that we need to have a definitive explanation, investigation, to show whether it fell out from a lab by accident or whatever. But to me, what's important about this is the precaution, because the environment is best managed under the precautionary principle. If anything, if you have doubt, you don't have enough proof to show that it's safe, the principle says halt, don't go further. We don't need to rush into things that could expose us to harm. And this is why we are deeply worried about so many things going on in terms of the new seed law, plant variety protection law that was just signed by the president a couple of weeks ago or days ago. Now, one may say that this is not environmental, this is agriculture, but as we've also agreed, they're all interconnected. You introduce a seed or you criminalize local seeds that farmers have produced, have maintained over the years. This could raise issues. One thing I want to plead for about those who are in authorities, and I know the minister and the Minister of State are listening quite a lot, is that voices outside of government should also be paid attention to. Some people in position of authority believe that whatever they say is law, you can't do anything about it. In fact, they call you unpatriotic when you raise concerns. But actually, we should be partners in progress because we are living in the same environment, we are protecting the same environment, and we are concerned about the lives of our people. When things are applauded, we applaud it. For example, the move by the Ministry of Environment to see to the restoration of mangroves, this must be applauded, and communities must team up and do that because the mangroves in the Niger Delta are very important for fisheries in the entire Gulf of Guinea. In fact, on the entire coastline of Africa, from Senegal to Namibia to South Africa, very important. And fishes have ways of moving, migrating, and what they expect to see. When they come to Niger Delta and find the mangroves are gone, everywhere is polluted, they get disoriented and they die off. This has negative impact on both our local economy and also the entire aquatic ecosystem
Well, Architect Nimo Bassi, thank you very much. I mean, you've raised an encyclopedia of fresh issues. I recall also that some years ago we had you here in the Abuja studios discussing GMOs. And now it looks like the coast is enlarging, not just with what is available, but also the seeds and seedlings. I heard also recently, Kirian.
The GMO, as you mentioned.
Yeah, the GMO, we are not going to have enough time. And we'll come back to the Honorable Minister to respond very briefly to that. But it's a subject that we'll have to take on again. I read recently, Kirian, that there were concerns that there are also now GMO tilapia fish. I don't know how that works out, you know, that you have all kinds of quote unquote, plastic fish and so on and so forth. It's a major subject matter. Nimo Bassi would like to thank you for raising those issues. Very quickly, Mr. Desmond Majakodumi, while we are still on the issues of environment, some of the matters that sometimes we don't appear to pay close attention to, what do you think can be done? And I would tick off some of those items. Industrial effluents. I mean, who controls industrial waste from factories or plants where these ones are still functioning on account of industrial capacity utilization? And then everyday activity. In Lagos, you have millions of vehicles and you have thousands of mechanics. How do they deal with engine oil, with diesel and waste from what they do? How do they dispose of their batteries? That same question can be asked elsewhere in the country. And more importantly, fumes from generators.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a massive issue, and unfortunately, I realize that we're running out of time, but we need to tackle this. You know, the reality is that we human beings, we've been far too arrogant, thinking, okay, we have so much power, we have dominion, this, that, and the other. No, 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 no. We are rubbishing nature far too much, and she's hitting us back. Secretary General of the United Nations has warned us. Definitely, there's a massive responsibility on the Ministry of Environment. Again, we repeat it and repeat it. This is the Ministry of the Life Support System. If that goes wrong, everything else goes wrong. Apart from just following the laws and regulations to reduce pollution, to reduce industrial waste, the one thing that is lacking, and I'm very, very, very worried about it, is that the reforestation and the trees. And what worries me is that last year, our president categorically stated to the world at the United Nations, Nigeria is embarking on 25 million tree planting. Unfortunately, that target was not met. I think it was affected by COVID. And this year, we're not seeing much in that regard at all. And the main solution to the environmental problems on our planet is trees, trees, and more trees. Pakistan has pledged to plant over 2 billion trees in the next few years. We need to revisit this very, very quickly. And please, let's also put our eye on the ecology fund. We'd like to see it far more practically exploited. Lagos coast, for instance, is having massive sea erosion, and we're not seeing any deployment of the ecology fund to that. It's our hearts and our minds. We really, really need to concentrate on that. And it's also serving our God. We praise our God, we worship our God. He has put us in charge of his creation. He has said his creation is very good. If we really love our God, then we will care for his creation. And it's our children's life support system.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Majakodumi. Thank you indeed for that advice to the nation. Let's turn to the minister. Minister, in 30 seconds, your final thoughts on this matter.
Okay. All right. Quickly, for Cross River, we are even doing more. Apart from changing the direction, we have totally reduced that buffer zone. They are talking about even less than 10% of what they requested from the beginning. GMO, very serious. Our biodiversity and biosafety agency is on top of things, really is world class, and again, one of the main ones in Africa. So again, there will be time to talk about that. We are working with NGOs and CSOs, all kinds of collaboration. Mangrove, we are just starting now. We intend to do all of the south, and wherever there are mangroves, because they are special trees. So the Federal Ministry is getting robust support from Mr. President, really, with special intervention from Ecological Fund and from Natural Resources Fund to be able to carry out our jobs.
All right, Minister. At this point, we'd like to thank you for your time and, of course, sharing your thoughts with us this morning on Good Morning Nigeria. Honorable Minister of Environment, Muhammad Mahmoud Abubakar, thank you indeed for being here this morning.
Thank you. You are very welcome.
Architect Nemo Bassi, Director, Head of Mother Earth Foundation, we appreciate your contribution this morning to Good Morning Nigeria. And we also like to thank Desmond Majakulumi, founder, Lekki Urban Forest, who reached us via Zoom from Lagos. Thank you indeed for being part of our show this morning.
All right, so that's it on Good Morning Nigeria for today. The program returns tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, do take care of yourself. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Kurian Umayo. Do have a great day.